Hey everybody, Ryan here at eTrailer. Today on our 2015 Ford Taurus, we're going to be showing you how to install the Blue Ox base plate kit. But before we do that, why don't we check this out and make sure it's going to be the right setup for you. Before we get too carried away talking about the base plate and what it can do and everything else, I figured it'd be useful just to kind of touch base and refresh yourselves on the main parts that we're going to need to flat tow our vehicle down the road in the first place. And the first one is going to be the base plate, and this is going to provide us with a solid attachment point. That way we can hook our tow bar up to it. And the tow bar is going to be the second component, and that's going to be the physical link that's connecting the front of our Ford to the back of our motorhome. The third main component will be safety cables, and these will connect to the front of our Ford and the back of our motorhome's hitch. And that's just a safety device in case of an accidental disconnect. They're going to keep everything paired together. The fourth main component will be tow bar wiring, and what that's going to do is transfer the lighting functions from the back of our RV to the back of our Torse, keeping you safe and legal. And last but not least, the fifth main part will be a supplemental braking system, and what that's going to do is apply the brakes in our car whenever we hit the brakes in our motorhome, helping to bring us to a more predictable and complete stop. But with that out of the way, let's check this out. So in terms of appearance, I think it's probably the best looking one available. Everything's contained within this lower portion of the grille. It has a matte black finish, so it almost matches the plastic perfectly. And compared to some of the other ones, they sit way out here. You have to do a lot more cutting and everything. So this one's a little less, they're a little more inconspicuous, if you will. The safety chain tabs, I guess you could call them, I feel like they could shorten them up a little bit because they do come out a little ways, but not really a big deal. It makes them a lot easier to use. You know, they're in the open and easy to get to, and I feel like that's really important actually when it comes to flat tow stuff. You know, you don't want something that's complicated. You know, you want it to be easy to use, easy to set up. That way you can get going and not have any confusion. And because this one has removable arms, it makes it really simple. So the way these work is what you would do when you're ready to hook up to your motorhome. You come to your base plate and you pull out, they give you these caps. So it cleans up the look of it a little bit and keeps stuff from getting in there and chewing everything up inside. But the way these are going to work, so you just slide them in and then rotate them about a quarter turn and they'll lock into place. Same deal with this one over here. And now you're ready to hook your tow bar up to it. So you pull up behind your motorhome and lock your tow bar into these. These are going to work with a lot of Blue Ox tow bars and as well as other brands. A lot of times they'll have adapter ends on them and things like that. So one right off the top of my head I like, the Roadmaster Nighthawk. They actually have one that has Blue Ox ends on it, so it pairs right up to the base plate. So, you know, if that's something you're looking for, definitely check those out. Something I do want to mention, they say the base plate will work with all the different types of models, whether you have a base model 1, the show or SHO model, the ones that have adaptive cruise control and all that. The base plate is supposed to work, so you should be covered there. And at the end of the day, you know, you really can't go wrong with it. Blue Ox makes good parts. I feel like it'll track well and last a long time. In terms of installation, it's a little more on the difficult side. I've done base plates that are harder to install. I've done some that are easier. But a word of advice, if I had to give one, it would be make sure you have some sharp drill bits because there is quite a bit of drilling into the frame area, and so it's you know, high quality steel and pretty tough. So get some sharp bits. I think the majority of them I used 8/3/8 in size. So if you're covered there, it should really help speed things up, but still set aside probably the better part of a day to get this done. If you'd like to follow along and see how it's done, feel free to. We'll go ahead and put it on together now. To begin our installation, we're going to be here at the front of our Torse, and we need to remove our front fascia. So first things first, pop the hood. We're gonna have this radiator cover here. So whatever I do to one side of our vehicle, we're gonna do to the other side because it'll be set up the same way. So to get this off, we're gonna have 4 Phillips head screws along the front edge. Pull these out. And then we can switch out to a 10mm socket, and we'll have 2 bolts. And we'll grab a flathead screwdriver, and there's a push pin right here. So you can just pry underneath the head of it, then work the base out. I already removed the fasteners on this side, so we should be able to get this removed. So it was attached to this clip here. It was going through this little panel, or this little cutout there. So all I did, I just reached under there and kind of lifted up on it. I was able to pop this off, and now we can set it to the side. Now we can move to our wheel well liner, and along the edge we're gonna have 3 5.5mm screws we need to pull out. It does help to turn your wheel in one way or the other, gives you some more space. But we'll go ahead, grab our socket, and get these out. And once these are out, and while we're right here, in this area, we're gonna have another fastener we need to pull out as well. So right there in the corner, here's the fastener we need to take out, and it's a plastic one. It's a Phillips head. You're gonna take your screwdriver and just lightly apply some pressure and back it out. A lot of times these will get hung up and just spin, which it looks like that's our case right now. That's coming out, it looks like. If it does just spin, you can always take a flathead screwdriver and just kind of help pry it down. Once you get to a decent point there, if the center of it's not wanting to come out, take a pair of needle nose pliers and just kind of pull down on it. That was in the middle, this plastic screw. Once that is out, then you can take the base out and just pry down on it and get it removed. Now underneath the front of our car, if you look along this edge, we're gonna have 5 more of these plastic fasteners. These are the same style of ones that were in our wheel wells that are kind of tricky to get out sometimes, but I'll just use that same method to get all these removed here. Just gotta ever so slightly put a little upward pressure on it while you're backing these out. Now if you look just in front of your front tire, in the corner of your wheel well liner, you're gonna have an 8mm head screw that we can pull out. Now with the extra set of hands, we can actually get our front fascia removed. I did put some tape here along the seams, that way we don't scratch it, because we may have to take a small screwdriver and kind of pry in there, which we didn't need to, because there will be little clips sometimes in there that you might have to kind of mess with to get them undone. But we can just work our way around, pop these off, and looks like our fog lights are going to have an electrical connection. You just push down on the tabs to remove them. And once we have them disconnected, we can set our fascia off to the side. Over here on the passenger side now, we can get our washer fluid reservoir removed. And so I'm going to kind of take off some of the wires connected to it. You can just pry these off. And we're going to unplug the connectors. So push down on the center of the tab and pull them out. Move that out of the way. And now I'm going to disconnect our hose here. And what I'm going to do, ours is of course completely full. Really don't want to make a huge mess, so what I came up with, I just had a piece of line laying around. I plugged it. When I pull this off, I'm going to put this on. Hopefully that'll plug it up. And then I'm just going to take a bolt, plug it in that line, so stuff don't go everywhere. So with this, I'm just going to kind of carefully start to work this rubber line off of the pump. Slip that on, pop that in. Now we can get our reservoir off, so we're gonna have two 11mm nuts, one right here. And then another one just like it, right there. And in this corner, I believe that's an 8mm, and that should be all of them. We'll see, we should be able to kind of pull this out and work it down and out from our engine compartment. If you look at the side of our air dam here at the bottom, we have a piece of plastic that runs back and connects to this piece. There's a push pin fastener there, and so we're going to pull that out like that. And then if we follow it up on our front bumper beam, we're going to have two more fasteners. That's an 8mm, and this one is connected to a bracket that holds up this ambient air temp sensor. So I think once that is off, we can kind of lift up on this and just kind of tuck it off to the side for now. On top of our air fin assembly here, we're gonna have a wire, and that has a connector on it. We need to separate it, so push down on the middle, and then I'm going to pry off all the keepers here. It's just those two, and then if you kind of squeeze on these, you can pull out, and behind here, kind of behind the bumper beam, there's going to be a bracket that kind of wraps around the bumper beam, and we need to get that off so we're able to remove our whole assembly here. The way to get this off, if you look, we have some tabs that kind of protrude through the bracket. One up top, two just like it towards the bottom. These are kind of tricky sometimes. We need to squeeze them in, and while we're squeezing it in, kind of work that bracket off. And what I think I might do, we should be able to, actually without taking those bottom ones off, we can probably just carefully pull out on this and slide the whole assembly down, and with it removed, we can set it to the side. So what I went ahead and done was get our base plate into position, and you definitely need an extra set of hands with this because it's really heavy, and a couple of clamps like this, but it slides up into place like how I have it here, and there's a raised portion in the side of our frame rail. This U cutout kind of goes up and around it, and hold it in place and then clamp it down. And then you want to make sure it's level and everything, so you can clamp, keep tightening until it stops, it hits the bottom of the frame, and then you want to make sure that this distance is the same on each side as well. So I just measured from the flange, the back of our bumper beam, to this corner here, got it the same on both sides, and then just to be on the safe side, I took a marker and just kind of traced it in case it gets bumped out of position or anything. At least we have a reference. But with that said, now we can start to drill out some of the holes. So there will be a couple on the bottom and then two on the sides. We're going to start with one of them on the bottom. So with these, I usually like to start with this one back here, but my clamp's in the way. So if you can, position your clamp. I'm not going to undo it because I don't want to have to go through it again, but if you can, start with this one. It's not a big deal though. We can always use this one here. So take the drill bit listed in the instructions, and that's the proper size. It just fits right up through this opening, and we're going to drill a hole right into the bottom of our frame. The hardware that we're going to use to secure the base plate, what you're going to do is take a handle nut, and this handle nut is going to go through this opening in here. And so it's going to be tricky to see on camera, but when you look in here, you can see where the hole is that we drilled. And so you want this to end up lining up with it. And I do suggest taking the hardware. So for the bottom bolts, you're going to use these here and put on a split lock washer. Before you get it started or anything, I do suggest just kind of running the bolt through the handle nut, because sometimes there can be some slop in there that'll make this difficult to start. So it just makes it easier. And you're also going to take red Loctite and put that on the threads of all the hardware that we're going to use to secure the base plate. So I'm going to take this, get it in position here, then take our bolt, run it up through, and then we can get this started hand tight. So now you want to grab a 9/16 socket and just snug these down a little bit by hand. You don't want to get too carried away cranking down on them and torquing them just yet. We just want to kind of take that slack out and snug it down. I'm going to move up now to the side of her frame, and I'm going to drill out this hole here. And what I'll do, once that's drilled, we'll get our bolts in, and then we should be able to get rid of our clamps and continue on with this one and the other one on the bottom. For the bolts that go here in the side, same deal with the handle nut. Bend it the way you need to, where it lines up. And then you're just going to use a split lock washer and one of the shorter bolts. And don't forget your Loctite. So we'll go ahead and get this going here. So I went ahead and did the same thing over on the other side, getting the two bolts started and snug down. So I snug this one down too, and that'll be enough to keep our base plate, in place. And at this point, I'll get our clamp out of the way, and then I'll just continue to drill this hole, the one on the bottom, and use that same hardware combination and technique to get those bolts in and snug as well. So once we have those 4 bolts in and snug, like we talked about, we're going to have one more that we need to drill right here at the front edge of our base plate. And so I'm going to drill up through it, through our bumper beam, where it's going to come out in the middle of it. And once I get that done, the hardware that we're going to use is a little bit different, so I'll get this drilled out and then show you what I'm going to use here. So I got that hole drilled out, and then you're going to take 6 flat washers, and I like to tape them together. It just makes it a lot easier to work with. And you're going to use those to kind of fill that gap there between the base plate and the bottom of our bumper beam. And then you're going to take the medium length bolt, Loctite, split lock washer on it, and that will run up through, and then just finish it off with a handle nut. With all of our hardware in place and snug, we want to make sure to come back with a torque wrench and tighten it all down to the amount specified in the instructions. If you don't have a torque wrench, you can always go in here at eTrailer, or a lot of times go to your local auto parts store. We'll have one there available to rent. And Once everything's torqued, you can get rid of these handles here. So a lot of times you can just work it back and forth and snap it off. Or if that one's giving you trouble, you can always come back and with a pair of snips or something and cut the rest of them off. So what we can do now is move back to our washer fluid reservoir, and there's a tab on it, this one here, that we're going to trim. It looks like it'll interfere with our base plate, so I marked it out, and just being thin plastic, I'm going to use a pair of snips to cut that portion off. Probably advise against power tools in this situation, because if you slip, you'll probably hit the actual reservoir and probably leak. So get the snips and just get that material removed. We can put our washer fluid reservoir back on. First you want to take 7 of the smaller washers, flat washers, and again I tape these together. You'll pop them over that stud. This will simply just get reinstalled. Essentially the opposite way that we removed it. The exception of the bolt there. So we'll put our nuts back on, tighten them down, and then we can just plug all of our connectors and everything else back in. So I went ahead, got this all plugged back in and everything, just like we talked about. And then on each side of your base plate, they give you a safety cable, and so I installed those. Turned out pretty good actually. I just used this hole here in our subframe, wrapped it around twice, and then used the provided D-link to wrap it around our base plate there. And then I like to just take zip ties and kind of zip tie everything up tight. That way this isn't clanking around or rattling or anything along those lines. Now we can move to our air shutter system. And so this is the bottom, this is the top. On the bottom, you need to remove 3 of the louvers. That way it'll clear the base plate. And so if you take a screwdriver, I'm gonna come into the corners here. You can start to kind of pry this piece off. Just like that. And to get these out, you just pry up on the middle of them. And then we should be able to kind of bend them in. Yeah, just bend them in a little bit. And that will allow us to slide them out. So I'm going to do the same thing here for 2 more. To get these out of the way. And if you want, if you think you ever might, you know, remove the base plate for any reason, if you sell a car or anything, you can always hold on to this type of stuff too and reinstall it. It's entirely up to you though. And now with it like this, what we can do, these pieces we need to completely remove too, so I'm just going to pry them off as well. Take the one off over here on the other side, and once I get that one off, we should be able to get this reinstalled. I'll go ahead and slide this back in place. Go back around, and then we'll just re-secure it the opposite way that we removed it. So now we can move to the back side of our front fascia, and on each side we're going to have some material that we need to remove. There's a diagram in the instructions. They say to cut to about here. In my experience, they usually undershoot it, so I'm just going to go a little bit further. It's not supporting anything or really doing anything, so it's not going to hurt to remove a little extra. That way we don't have to fight it. So I marked that out. I'm just going to use a cutoff wheel to get all that removed. So now what we're gonna do is take our fascia and not put it completely on, but kind of test fit it, if you will. And the reason being, you want to kind of hold it in place and look down here and see where we need to cut. So we're in pretty good shape, honestly. What I'll probably do is pull this off and just kind of cut out some slots here. That way our base plate and everything will be able to come through and we'll be able to use it. So you got a couple of choices. You can take it off and cut it. Honestly, after looking at it, might as well just cut it while it's halfway on the car. So I'm just gonna go where I think we need to remove that material, take some snips and trim it out. So once I got everything how I wanted it in terms of trimming, I just cut them little spots out like we talked about earlier. I simply just re-secured the fascia the opposite way that we removed it, so nothing different there. I did forget to mention, if you're going to be installing other flat towing components like a braking system or wiring or anything along those lines, usually what I like to recommend is leave the fascia off, get all that stuff in place. It's just a lot easier to work whenever you have all the extra space. And then once those parts are on, obviously come back and do this. But, you know, definitely makes it a little bit easier. But other than that, that will finish up our look at and our installation of the Blue Ox base plate kit on our 2015 Ford Taurus.